Hey, it's Prestige from Noisemasters, and today you are going to learn how to create jump up like Skantia. So first of all, what are the characteristics of this kind of jump up? The main element in those kind of tunes is that heavy, grotty, Formant filtered bass line that is just rumbling through the speakers. The second main element is a set of very heavy, snappy, but tight drums. So sound selection here is absolutely crucial. Alright, so enough talking, and let's get into that. I found out that it's very easy to start those tracks with drums. So first of all, we can pick few drums here. So I will start with a kick. Very punchy and also short. By the way, for every sound in this video, I will be using our jump up box 2, which is literally the best pack for this kind of drum and bass. So right now we will just put some basic kick pattern. So on the first beat and on the third offbeat. Alright, we can do it for like 4 bars, and then we can copy paste that. So we will be having 8-bar kick loop. Now we can add a snare. I'm trying to find something clappy, so not necessarily a snare, but more like a clap. In Skantia's tunes, you can really hear that he's using more kind of like a claps or some sort of like a hybrid between clap and a snare. So we can copy paste that to every second and fourth beat. We can lower the volume a little bit. We can try to layer it with some other snare. This one, for example. So we will just copy paste the layer. So we will do it like that, exactly like our main snare is. We can cut the transient out from the first one. We can add another layer. So for example, something like this. So we will have this kind of like tail of the snare. And now we can add some hi-hats. So those tracks are not having too complicated hi-hat patterns. You can have just a simple 1 hat per beat pattern and it will be very good. So we can do something like this. And we can do also some wider hi-hat or like more open hi-hat on the third beat. So something like that. Alright, we can also add some ride right now. We can pick, for example, this ride. This will be nice. And we will just shorten it or fade it out. Like this. And now let's continue with some bass. So I will open Vital. We will just search through some sounds. So we can go through those. This would be sick. Sheesh, that sounds good already. So first of all, this bass is like very simple. We're just having few crucial points that need to be covered. So basically what is creating this kind of grotty feeling in this bass is this Formant filter. So without it, it is literally like a normal saw wave, I would say. But with that, you're immediately having this Skantia vibe. So you just need to go here in the filters and you'll just pick Formant and you can pick one of those two. This is basically really characteristic filter for those kind of jump up styles. So if you're looking into that, definitely use this kind of filter. And after that, we are just having our sub, which is like a typical sine wave. So at -24 to have it like in a proper bass pitch. And after that, we are having the main oscillator, which is basically just a basic shapes, and it is forming a saw wave right now. But initially it was a square wave. But with this warp, which is called spectral morph, you can turn it into this kind of shape. So basically a saw wave that is a little bit curved like this. And also we added sync, which added that higher harmonics and that higher tone. Because without the sync, it is just like a normal bass. But when you will add sync, it really creates that higher pitched texture which you really want in those kind of basses. If you want to create different kind of tonalities or different versions of this bass, you can just go into the Formant and you can just change the cutoff or the Y and X axis. And you're immediately having a little bit different sound. Also, you can notice that there is a lot of movement, kind of like a vibrato or tremolo in this bass. It's made with this LFO that is set to very high frequency, that is being set to very high speed. Frequency here is being set to seconds, and it's just looping through that very quickly. This is actually modulating the Formant filter, so the X and Y axis, just a little bit with the very small volume, and that is creating this kind of like tremolo effect. So if we will bypass that, you will notice that the bass becomes very static and kind of uninteresting. Not a lot of movement when you will bypass that. And then the last part that is completing this sound is the noise. So basically, I have picked basically just the organic noise from Vital. So I've picked the grinder. And this is very good for those kind of basses. You definitely need something more textury, not just a basic white noise, because those basses are very kind of like texturized and they are sounding more organic. So you will also need noise that is kind of reflecting that. But that's definitely not everything. A lot of the magic happens in the effect. So let's break that down. First of all, OTT, that is boosting some frequencies here and there. So lows, mids, and we're reducing some of the highs. Then heavy hard clip distortion. So without the distortion, it was sounding like that. So not very heavy. But with the distortion, you will just completely change the sound, especially with this heavy one. After that, you can EQ some peaks, so you can highlight some of the key characteristics or key frequencies of the sound. So without this peak frequency, it doesn't sound that sharp, but this highlights exactly that resonant frequency that needs to be highlighted. And then just a high shelf to make the noise pop up more to the front. So without it, you can hear a lot of mids, but with that, you will bring a lot of that grittiness from that grinder noise sample. That is a lot of boosting and distorting stuff, so you will definitely have some unpleasant resonant frequencies in this, so you can get rid of that with the filter. So that's exactly what I did here. So without the filter, there is this very resonant frequency that is just below this one that we boosted. So it's this one, but I have took it down with this filter. So just a notch filter and you will be good to go. After that, chorus, to widen it up a little bit. So we don't want our sound to be just in the middle, but in the full stereo spectrum. Just a little bit of chorus will definitely do the job. So you don't need too much chorus. You just need like up to 15%. And the last thing is kind of dip it up with the reverb, because those basses are really kind of almost industrial and you need to add to them this kind of like washed out feeling almost. If you don't want to do this kind of messy sound designing just by yourself, this preset is also included in our jump up box too, and you will find a link in the description. So right now that we are having the bass fully broken down, we can go and write some notes. So we can try something out. So something like this. I'm thinking something like a D would be nice. All right, and we can do this kind of like A-B pattern. So this bass will be repeating right here, right here, right here, and right here. And in between that, there will be something different, like at least something subtle, like 808 or something like that, or some effects, or either some different bass line. Right there, the last note can go a little bit higher. So right now that we are having the first A part bass, we can go to the second bass, which I also like to call the B part. So this kind of drum and bass is also structured in A and B. So this is like a A structure and then the B. So this will be repeating every time. So you're having one bar A, second bar B, one bar A, second bar B. And that will be repeating throughout the whole track. So now we can just open Serum for the B bass and we can try to go through some sounds, so we will see what will fit there. So maybe something like that, or we can try to go through some more. This one is good, so we can definitely go with this one. Alright, we can definitely do something like that. So we will put this sound here, so like a B part. We can also name it A part, B part. We can also do a little C part here where the Reese bass will be. So we can already do like a C part pattern where we will add a Reese bass later. So right now let's just break down the sound so you will know how to make this kind of sound by yourself. So we'll just go one by one. We will need just the first oscillator because the other two are just for the macros. On the oscillator A, you will be having just a default wavetable, so wave, when we will disable all the warps, so PVM and signfold. You will have -2 octaves, so it hits proper bass range. Then a lot of those kind of basses will have the PVM, which kind of like shortens the wavetable, so you will have almost like a filter on it. With the signfold, we're just adding more kind of distortion into the wavetable, so it is having this kind of like higher growthy texture inside. The level of this oscillator is modulated by this LFO, which is being set to 1/4. And that is modulating the level plus the PVM right now. This oscillator goes also through peaky filter, which is also being modulated, but with LFO3. On LFO3, I'm having this kind of triangular shape that is moving like this, so it's more natural kind of modulation than just a normal LFO shape. In Serum 2, you can also do this kind of stuff, which is really cool. And then a lot of the characteristics of the sound is based inside of the effects. So first of all, I am filtering the sound with this kind of like a band pass. It's the new filter that is in Serum 2, EXP-BPF, but it's essentially just a bypass filter, which is also being modulated just by different LFO. You can notice that I'm using a lot of LFOs there. This is just to kind of diversify the movement between the different elements. So for example, filter is doing one movement, and then the oscillator A-warp is doing a completely different movement. So that is making the bass kind of more alive in a sense. So after the filter, we are then having just a multi-band compression, then distortion, quite a very heavy distortion with overdrive and stack 2. Stack 2 basically means that you are kind of stacking two distortions on top of each other. This means that it acts in the same way like I would have just two distortion modules over the top. So this is what the stack does, and you can do like up to 16. Which is basically extreme distortion, and you don't want that in the most cases. So the stack of 2 is the correct sizing here. So drive at 30% and mix on 100. After that, we are widening it up with the chorus, another multi-band compression, then plate reverb. To kind of wash out the sound, you can remember from the previous sound, like I said, you need to kind of wash out those sounds because they are very kind of almost industrial. And they need to sound kind of spacious with a big size. So that's why we are always adding reverb to them. Just be careful, so you'll also low cut the reverb, so you are not reverbing also your sub bass. After that, I'm using a splitter, so I'm adding a various different effects on the lows, highs and mids. So this is just to tone the sound, and you can do it up to your likings, because this is like very special to every single sound. So you can do filtering, for example, to bring up or notch down some of the frequencies. Also, I did here quite a big notch right there. So I got rid of some resonant frequency that I didn't want it there. Also, just a little bit more boosting with the multi-band compressor, some more filtering, and just more kind of this stuff to texture the sound a little bit more. You can also add utility, so you can make sure that your bass is in mono, or your sub bass or lower basses are in mono, because that's very important. So you're not having like too much stereo in your bass, but you're having it controlled. It's not bad to have stereo in your bass, you just need to have it controlled and in the right place. So that's exactly what we are doing here in the mono bass. So frequency can be set somewhere around here, so around 90 Hertz. And basically this switch means that every frequency that goes below this will be exactly in the mono. So we are basically having the fundamentals of this bass, and now we can move towards the C part, which will be, for example, a Reese bass or some other element that will kind of break the tension in between those two A and B parts. You can, for example, add Vital, and we can design this kind of Reese bass on the go. So I will just pick a saw wave. So as you know from our previous video, for a Reese bass, you need two saw waves that are being detuned. We will do also a second saw wave like this, and we will detune them. So one will have this tune in positive volume, and the other one will have in negative volume. And suddenly we are having a Reese bass. So right now we just need to filter it like this. We also can enable voices to 1 and legato and glide, so we can have like a gliding bass. Now we can add also some white noise on top. Right now we are having just a basic Reese bass, but with the effects everything will change. First of all, we will add equalizer, so we can kind of shape it in a way that we want. So I really wanted to have a lot of bass and high frequencies, so I will kind of like create this kind of notch in the mids. A lot of heavy Reese basses will have this kind of EQ, so you can immediately hear the difference, that this versus this. And that is just a simple EQ that is having this kind of notch in the mid-range or boost in the lows and the highs. After that, we will just add distortion. And you're suddenly having like a massive Reese bass. So we can control the detuning right there. If you want to have it faster, you can just put a bigger number there, or if you want to have it slower, you'll just put a smaller number here. It's simple. I want to have it a little bit faster, so something like this. Or you can just make the difference bigger between those. So with this one, I can go further into negative numbers, and it will keep getting more detuned and faster. So something like that is what I'm looking for. And then with the compressor, we can put the compressor after the distortion. Something like this, and we'll finish it off with some chorus. So something like that, and now we can draw in some notes, for example. So we can do something like this. We can try to make the C part we can completely like leave out the B part, for example, and we can also like have only the C part here. This is also a possibility. We can try to fine-tune the effects to our likings. We can then change the C part here. For example, we can do something that will go something like that. And now we just need to add a separate sub, so we can have like a clean sub underneath all of our basses, and the sub that is already in the preset, we will cut it out, so we can have like a clean, nice sub. I will just open Serum for that. Alright, so in the Serum, we will just open Analog, we'll go to Basic Shapes, we will just pick a sine wave, we'll do -2. We can add a little bit of attack and release. So we'll get rid of that click, and now we will just assign all of our basses to the mixer. So this one, also this one, and also this one. All right, so now we are having all the basses in the mixer, so we can name them. So we can group them into one group mixer bus. So we can do something like this, and we will just unroute them from the master, so they will just go into this mixer bus. So we will call it a bass group, and everything will go there. And now we can process them together. So we can do a low cut, so we will save some space for the sub that we just added. Alright, and now we can actually write in some sub underneath. So we will just open the sub piano roll. We will have just a sustained notes. We don't really need to replicate any rhythmicality from our main basses. It's way better to have just a sustained sub. Like this, we can copy paste it right there. And in the last section, our C part is changing a little bit. So we are also going to change our sub bass from D to A. So It's actually very low, so it's not really audible, so we can do like a octave up. We can also enable some sliding there, as on the Reese bass there is a sliding enabled, so we can do the same in the Serum with mono, legato and portamento time. And with that, we can enable this kind of sliding also on the sub. So right now, let's get into some mixing. So first of all, we can make this a little bit more tidy. We can kind of organize it. So we will also color it so it's nice and organized like this. So right now that we are having everything in the bass group and everything in the mixer, we will also need to create a sidechain. So sidechain is basically a technique in music production that enables the kick punch more through the mix when bass line is also playing. So it's a technique where you're ducking down your bass line exactly when the kick hits, so your bass line and kick are not clashing together. So I will show you this in practice right now. I will name this channel a sidechain. I have routed our bass group channel into the sidechain, and we will just simply automate this volume fader exactly where our kick plays. So I will just put a new channel here, and I will add a sidechain automation here. So I will just copy the volume, so we are having the default volume on the go, and I will just shorten it down to approximate length of our kick. So right there, I will just paste the volume on the default. So right there, we will need to kind of replicate the curve of our kick, but in reverse. You can think of it that when our kick fades out, our bass needs to fade in. So on the first beat, we are not really hearing anything because our bass is starting from the second beat. This is also a common technique in those kind of jump up styles. We will try to do this on the second kick. So you can already hear that it ducked there, but pretty heavily. So we need to kind of shorten it so it exactly reflects and mirrors the shape of our kick. And in FL, you are having this kind of curve called double curve, which you can exactly shape in the way that your kick is being shaped. And with that, we are having a perfect sidechain that is exactly mirroring our kick. So we can just copy paste that to every single kick that we are having in our track, like this. And also a lot of producers like to sidechain the snare. This is being done from a perspective where we want to make the snare pop more in the mix. So the snare is not clashing with your bass, but it's just to put the snare in front of the bass in the mix exactly when the snare hits. So right there we can create just this kind of tiny space for our snare to hit more. So most of the times your snare sidechain will be way smaller than the kick sidechain, as your snare is usually shorter than your kick. We will also do that on every single snare. So we'll just copy paste that. Like this. And now we're having like a proper sidechain on the track. Now let's process it a little bit because it deserves a little bit stronger sound, especially the B part bass. So we can check the A part firstly. It is actually very good out of the box, so I will not process that one, but with the B part bass, I can imagine something stronger. So we will just add a little bit of a clipper to boost the sound more. So with the clipper, we can just make the gain on the input higher. To bring up the volume a little bit more. So something around 2 dB is usually like the correct volume. You don't need to go like crazy about like 10 dB or something like that. That will be just too much. You just need to go very kind of close to 0, so 1 dB, 2 dB, max 3 dB. If your sound is like very quiet, you can go higher, but that's not often the case. I will also add OTT to this one. So depth could be something around 22%, and we can also add a little bit of input gain. We can also add a little bit of saturation after that to bring more harmonics to the sound and overall kind of push the sound even further. Can select just a few frequency bands, so we can leave out on the lows as we are also cutting them out in the bass group, and we can just boost mids and highs. Now we can try how it sounds in the context. I think it sounds sick. So right now we can just move towards the build-up. So first of all, we will just create some space for the build-up. We will do something like that. We will position our drop at the end of a 16 bar. So our drop will start at the bar 17, and we will have 8 bars for the build-up and then 8 bars for the intro. And that will be like the complete sequence. So intro 8 bars, build up 8 bars, and then drop 8 bars. We can simply start the build up just by drag and dropping the hi-hats to the bar 9. And we will also have some atmosphere. So basically the main point of build up is to kind of introduce the drop energy. So that's exactly what we are doing here, introducing the drop cymbals, and then also we will introduce the drop bass. So we can do something like that, and this will be filtered and kind of washed out in the reverb. We can also add a kick riser or kick fill that will be in the build-up, so that will also kind of boost the energy and it will create some tension towards build-up. We can start copy pasting those kicks here and there. So with that, we will fasten the overall rhythm of this kick fill. And right there, after a few bars, we can double the speed again. Something like that. And with that, we can already add some more build-up elements like crashes, for example. Maybe some sweep ups or sweep downs, something like this. And we will definitely also need some riser. We can use this last bit like that. Like that. And now we can filter the bass and add reverb to it so it has that proper introduction feeling in the build-up. We can use a EQ for this filter, so we will just go and create high cut and we will automate the frequency. So with this, we'll just go there, we'll create a shape, create a single curve. Can make it so it gradually goes up. And now we can also add a reverb to this. With the reverb, we'll need something that will be a little bit bigger, and we can cut out the lows from this. So we'll pick a low cut. We can automate the mix. So we'll do basically a very similar automation like we did on the filter. But this can go like in a opposite direction. So we will have a lot of reverb in the beginning and then small amount of reverb at the end, and basically zero reverb at the drop. We can also add some snares and hi-hats in the second part of the build-up. So in a lot of jump up tracks, you can hear that they will introduce the snares in the second part of this build-up. Like this. And now we can also add the ride that is in the drop. We can fade it out a little bit more so it pops harder in the drop. And now we can just add some atmosphere on the beginning of the track. So we can go also in the serum and we will just pick some atmosphere. So maybe something like this, or even something like this for more creepy feeling. We'll just pick a different pattern. We'll pick the atmosphere. And this atmosphere can basically drag from the intro to the build-up. So basically we can do something that is 16 bars long. We can search through different ones. This is nice, so we can keep this one, and basically we can just add those hi-hats to the intro. And like that, you're having basically an intro for this kind of track. So right there, we can do some sort of like a fill that will introduce into the build-up. So or only like that snare. So that could sound cool in the context. We can also add some sweep ups here and also to the build-up. Alright, and now we can just do the final mastering. So we are having a fruity limiter. We'll delete this and we will use some clippers. So we will use V-clip, and the V-clip will basically ensure that we are not cutting anything down like with the limiters. Limiters are taming down your sound when something exceeds the threshold, but with the clippers it gets more distorted. So that's what we want in jump up. The change will be immediate when we will add a clipper. We don't need to add anything and it will immediately sound better. So we can test it on the drop. The kick is maybe too loud right now. We can also add some OTT or saturation to add a little bit more power to the overall master. So, but those will be just with very, very small amounts, so like maybe 1 or 2%. After that, we can add saturator. So we can add Saturn, and inside the Saturn, we will just pick few bands, so lows, mids, and highs, and we will disable the lows. We don't really want to saturate the lows. We just want a clean sub in the lows. We don't want to saturate that. So we will just saturate our mids. Maybe a little bit of the highs to make it pop more. And that was the final touch. It turned out pretty sick. You can find all of those sounds in the description in our jump up box too. If you're liking videos like these, just hit that subscribe button and write down below which style would you like to see next.